You're listening to the Raising Family Podcast with your hosts, David Steele and Linda Hill. Brought to you by thefamilyproclamation.org.
Hello and welcome to the Raising Family Podcast. I'm your host, David Steele, along with co-host Linda Hill. And today we are talking about paragraph 4, and we have the wonderful opportunity to have Collette Blackwelder here with us, who, none of you can see her like I can, but she looks like somebody in the room, and it's Linda. They are sisters.
We have been accused of being twins before. We are not.
But we're not. She is older.
Not supposed to tell that part.
They are not twins.
She's my little sister.
Except maybe in doctrine. They're doctrinal twins.
Doctrinal twins.
They believe a lot of the same things.
Crazy, huh?
Okay. So I'm just going to read the first. We're really focusing on the first sentence of paragraph 4. And there's some really amazing stuff that Collette has to say about it. And I think it'll be super beneficial for everybody listening. And so the first sentence of paragraph 4 is the first commandment that God gave to Adam and Eve pertained to their potential for parenthood as husband and wife. And so to start off, Collette studied undergrad. She studied history education, and then she got an MBA from BYU and currently works at BYU. And so maybe Collette, just to start us off, tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe about what you're doing currently in life, and then we can jump right in and talk about potential for parenthood and what that means to you.
Sure. So I am the third of 6 children. And as mentioned, Linda is my older sister. I emphasize older. And she may have shared, we were raised in a happy home, 6 children, lots of 5 girls running around, sharing one bathroom. But looking at, having good examples, great examples from our parents, and always having this, I had really 2 desires in my life early on. One was to go to BYU, and I didn't apply to anywhere else, which is not a very smart thing to do. And second was to be a mom and to be a wife and mother, and so that was my kind of upbringing. Mm-hmm. I did go to BYU and loved my experience. I served a mission in Florida, Jacksonville, Florida, and then the last 15 years I've worked at BYU and have loved my time at BYU. Got my master's degree later in life when I was about 40, 45. And that was a great experience as well, but much more challenging going back to school as an old person.
Yeah, I can't wait to try that. I'm waiting until I'm old so that I can experience that.
Join the club.
So maybe to start off, let's just talk about the potential for parenthood. We know you have quite a bit to say on it, and you've had a lot of experiences that have to do with this. So maybe just talk to us about what that means for you and kind of how your view has been shaped through your life experiences.
Sure. As I mentioned, that was one of my big dreams, is to be a wife and a mother. And as the third of 6 children, I saw my older 2 sisters meet and marry their husbands and go off. And by the time I turned 20, I know that seems really young in today's day and age, but at 20, I had no prospects. I was not dating anybody. And I remember having kind of a crisis of who am I, because all I had really thought of is to about the age of 20, being married and going to school. And so that was kind of a pivotal time in my life. I was blessed to have that experience to serve a mission. And it wasn't until I was about 25 that I met and married my husband. And the immediate thought was, fantastic. Next is to be a mom. And we got pregnant soon after we were married, and I lost that baby. I didn't think I was going to cry so quickly. But we lost that baby. And I remember being in the hospital and my husband and I standing there just devastated and making the promise to each other that we were going to have this experience make us stronger. And I didn't know then that we would have lots and lots of opportunities to be strengthened by challenges. But I also hearken back to my patriarchal blessing, which I received at about age 16, 17 years old. And at the time of that blessing, I remember distinctly the patriarch pausing at the moment where he talked about the foundation of my household would be based with the chief cornerstone being Jesus Christ, the other two cornerstones being the Melchizedek and the Aaronic priesthood, and the fourth cornerstone, the nobility of father and motherhood. And so that kept me going in a time of really great heartbreak.
Wow.
So that was almost 25 years ago, that first loss, and there were subsequent losses. But I always felt that the doctrine and the wisdom from my blessing, that there is a great nobility in fatherhood and motherhood, and that I could stand proudly as a mother with or without children on this earth.
And so what are some of the ways that you tried to fulfill that nobility of motherhood and fatherhood?
Well, you can ask Linda's children, but I am the favorite. I'm the favorite aunt.
The favorite aunt.
I think we're up to 20, 21, 22 nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
And I took that role and responsibility very seriously. I put it in my calendar. I would focus on what can I do this week that would impact the lives of my nieces and nephews. I also found that responsibility at church, in my church callings. I was primarily in Relief Society, but I also found through teaching about the doctrines of the family, and let me just go back to the Family Proclamation was given in 1995. Mm-hmm. In September. It was late September 30th, I think, somewhere in there. And I was engaged. I was 2 weeks engaged to my husband. And so I remember being in the tabernacle with another sister, hearing this Family Proclamation, and feeling strongly about it, but not overly like, that's just amazing. That's comes from nowhere. It was just a reiteration of how I'd felt all along. And so that kind of led me into beginnings of my marriage and with this promise, and also feeling very blessed that we were okay, that God made us. He knew what our bodies can do or not do, and we were his. And so it didn't mean that I didn't question or have hard moments. But I always felt like I could teach the doctrines of the gospel. I can teach about temple marriage. I can teach about children. And when I talked to the women, especially the women, or teaching Sunday school, I would teach about what we can do to help our children, because I felt very much a part of the eternal family, the whole gospel, the whole church organization, that these are my brothers and sisters, and how can we help our children, even though I didn't have any of my own.
Right.
I'm going to chime in here because, I, as a mother, with these 5 children, and I'm going to try not to get emotional because I'm going to be looking at my sister, but, she really has been such an amazing aunt, and she and her husband, Travis, have been just such great aunt and uncle for the kids. And as a parent, I know there's parents that want total control of everything that their kids do, right? They want their kids to come to them for everything or whatever. I guess I'm this other parent that believes that every good, righteous adult that has an influence on my children is such a blessing because it does take a lot of different people sometimes. There's things that maybe your kids don't feel totally comfortable talking to you about, but they might be able to go to another reliable, good, righteous adult to discuss something. Maybe my kids have probably gone to her a number of times and griped about me. I have no doubt. Yeah, she's going to claim ignorance over there, but but I'm grateful that my kids have other safe places to be and other adults that have this righteous influence. And that's the thing, is that they took that very seriously. And even some of the practical things, I know when my kids were going to school here, they were so blessed to have that influence. And then, Collette really got into her coupon clipping, and she'd go and stock up on deodorant and, feminine hygiene, the kind of stuff that college students do not want to buy or do not have the money to buy. Yeah. And the kids could go over there and know that they basically had a drugstore at Aunt Coco's house. And, these little things that she did to just totally nurture and take care of these nieces and nephews. As a parent, it means the world to know that my kids had these other safe places. I'm still, a state away. Mm-hmm. My kids went out of state to school, but they came here where they had, grandparents and especially aunts and uncles that were looking out for them. And what a blessing. I mean, I always felt I never worried about my kids here. I never worried about my kids here because I knew they literally had this other set of parents and this other great influence. And I will be forever grateful for that. Yeah. She takes it real seriously.
And it goes both ways, right? Because I felt like I was blessed to have them in my life. Right. And knowing that, when my time is to come to pass away, hopefully I have someone to celebrate my life. Yeah. And my nieces and nephews.
Oh, you do.
And you said earlier, you talked about, I'm trying to remember exactly what you said. Oh, I'm remembering. You said you, like in Relief Society, you'd get up and you could say our children, even though you didn't have any technical children of your own. And I feel like, was it ever extremely difficult? Like, was there a time where it was really hard for you to kind of grasp this concept of, I'm going to push forward and I'm going to accept this and I'm going to be a parent in as many ways as I can? And if it wasn't hard for you, why do you think it wasn't? Depending on which way it was,
It was certainly challenging. Christmases, I always had a bit of a melancholy feeling, wishing that there were little children running around opening presents. Mother's Day, like any woman who wants to have children and doesn't have children, Mother's Day can be challenging. Sometimes I could talk about it, and other times something would be said and I couldn't. Linda reminded me of an experience when she was unexpectedly pregnant with her 5th child. And she called and told my mother, that she was expecting. And I remember not wanting to sour her experience. Mm-hmm. And excitement or not excitement, whatever the emotion was.
I think I called in complete hysterics and tears. It was just, I had 4 under the age of 7. And then number 5 was a little unexpected. And of course, she's 22 now and she knows that she's absolutely, supposed to be, what do they say?
Just unexpected. I think.
Yes.
A surprise.
And I was feeling a bit overwhelmed, and I called my mother in hysterics. And she happened to be at Colette's place at the time, and she had just suffered a second miscarriage.
And I remember going into the closet, the literal closet, closing the door and sobbing. And that was also all of these experiences kind of come together that helped me realize that that I had choices to make. And this is no judgment on anyone who has their own struggles, because we all have our individual struggles, whether it's a lot of children or few children or no children, but these unrealized dreams. And all of those experiences kind of came together to help me realize that God knew me and that I can choose to be okay. I can choose to participate in baby showers and baby blessings and all of those kind of things. And I wanted to be open about my experience so that people that I can reach out and help those who were struggling. We always felt very guided along the way. We had failed adoption attempts, miscarriages, of course, and medical problems that really affected us. Medications that if I took, I wasn't supposed to get pregnant, So there were some really challenging times, and those were just really critical moments that I had to choose. And I'll never forget having to make that decision to go on this one particular medication, and knowing that it was really the end of my hopes. My hopes of being able to bear my own children. And but I also want to say, too, that my husband and I were happy. We have led a fun-filled, traveling kind of life together, and we've built a really strong foundation over the last 25 years, and we've loved life. And I also remember sitting with a friend, book club. My dearest girlfriends, who there are 6 of us, and we've been together for a long, long time, 20 plus years.
It's seriously like the longest running book club I have ever heard of personally.
It's amazing. We've been through.
How do I be inducted into this book club?
It is. Yeah, there's a secret password, and it's long forgotten, so no one can get in.
Traveled. They've gone to Paris together. I mean, they've gone on some trips. Yeah. It's an amazing group of women. Yeah.
And these friends there's been a lot that has happened over the last 20 years for all of us. And I remember sharing with these girlfriends one night about feeling almost guilty that we were happy with our lives. Like, shouldn't there be something more? Because I know so many women really suffer through these feelings, and not to negate those feelings, but I felt almost like, shouldn't I feel a little differently? Like I need to do something more. And one friend in particular, she said, Collette, that is a blessing from God. And I thought about that, and I realized, why am I feeling guilty about feeling happy with the life that God gave me? And so there seems to be maybe some incongruence in those statements, but I wanted so much to be a mom. Mm-hmm. I looked for opportunities to be a mom, but I still felt really happy with my life. And I felt that was a true gift. And it wasn't until someone articulated that to me that I realized that it was such a gift.
Yeah. Wow. And I feel like there's probably going to be, and I don't know exactly, maybe you can take a couple seconds and think about this. I'm sure there's going to be people listening to this that are currently in the struggle with infertility and with trying to reconcile the feelings of, this is what God asked me to do versus it's not happening. And I mean, really, I feel like for them, one of the greatest helps is just to hear from people who have experienced the same thing as them. And I feel like maybe just what would you tell them in this scenario if they are having, struggles with that?
The first thing that comes to my mind is do all you can to not compare yourself to someone else, because the perfect family doesn't exist. The perfect number of children doesn't exist. None of all of the things that we create in our mind, we have to figure out how God sees us and understands us. And I think that's really coming back to, what does God have in store for us, and not comparing ourselves to others, because I have had those moments, those months of just feeling like I'm not enough. And my feelings about feeling blessed does not negate those feelings of how difficult it really is. It's especially if that is a major goal in one's life, is to be a mom. I have a wonderful mother who was there for me when we'd come home from school. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be like her. She was always in the kitchen, and we'd sit on the counter, and I would swear I would not tell my mom what happened in junior high that day.
And we'd still end up spilling our guts.
Exactly. We would spill our guts. And I don't know what it was.
What was in those cookies?
It was in the cookies, but it was just in her presence. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be like that. So that's what I would say is don't compare and work on that reconciliation with God, because he's the only one that can give you the peace that one's searching for.
I also want you to just comment a little bit on Travis, your husband, because I know that early on when you were married, one thing Travis did is he mentored a lot of young people too. And so when we're talking about this potential for parenthood, between both of them, I want you to talk about some of the mentoring experiences that you've had, besides even nieces and nephews, because, I mean, like we said, you've done a stellar job there. But I know there have been other ways that you have mentored and even currently are mentoring young people.
Well, I remember early in our marriage, too, when we were having failed pregnancies, I remember Travis coming home one day, and he's a pretty solid individual, not hugely emotional when it comes to, he was my rock. He was the solid foundation. But I remember him coming home one time. He was working at the Family Support and Treatment Center, which is for families that are going through crisis. And he worked with crisis nursery, and he'd work with parents who are non-custodial parents and having to sit in with the non-custodial parent and their child. And so he saw a lot of the effects of abuse and addiction and some of those things. And I remember him coming home one day and just in tears, just saying, why, I know we could do something. We could really bless the lives of our children, and why can't we be parents? So
sometimes those things seem just monumentally unfair.
Unfair. Yeah.
Totally unfair.
And he's continued. He's in academics, and he also works at BYU, and he's currently our home ward bishop. And, I see he's never been a scouter. That's not his thing. But he connects with youth in a very personable way. And I think he's done a lot to bless the lives of children.
Wow. And so I know there's also a little more to your story.
There is. And as Paul Harvey says, this is the rest of the story. So we had determined that we were going to go into our life and retire maybe early. And
when did you write off that possibility? I remember you said there was a distinct place that we wrote off that possibility that you were going to be parents.
Well, I mean, talking about getting personal, but it was at that, at the moment when I had to take this medication for my own health. It was really 3 when I had a surgery that would, let's just say, to remove those possibilities. And 3rd, when my husband got sick, he was in kidney failure, and he was type 1 diabetic. And so kind of with those 3 pivotal moments, we're not going to be parents in this lifetime.
Right.
But still holding on to this promise of this nobility of father and motherhood, and this potential for parenthood. So the rest of the story is
my favorite part.
2 years this last week, I was having a conversation with a family member who shared with me that their daughter was pregnant. And I can picture myself sitting in the car. It's raining. We're sitting next to each other. She's emotional about about what was happening to her daughter. And I turned to her and said, would she consider Travis and I adopting? Now, I guess I talk about my age a lot, but I'm kind of proud of it. I turned 50 last week. So I was in my late 40s. I just turned 48.
And being just slightly older, I was a new grandma.
My sister was a grandma. Yeah, so I was older. But sitting there and just being overwhelmed with a warmth and I don't know whether I should say who it is or not, but this person was saying, she responded to me when I said, do you think Travis and your daughter would be open to us adopting? She said, don't you think you need to talk to Travis about that? And I said, well, of course. And so we kind of continued that conversation, and that was really all that was said in that conversation. And I went home, went to Costco, and then went home and was standing there with my husband, and I told him what happened. And he just looked at me, and I looked at him, and we both smiled. And that was about it. And so for about 3 days, we walked around the house. I went to church. There was a Sunday in there. And we looked at each other and we would just smile. And we didn't really talk about it too much. And then it snowballed. Within about 2 weeks, we were sitting with the birth mom and talking about adopting her child. And it was just meant to be. And 22 months later, we have this she's 22 months old now. We have this beautiful, beautiful daughter that was meant to be ours. And it couldn't be more of a perfect arrangement with the birth family. They connect with our daughter in a loving, appropriate, wonderful way. We have all of the support that this child is so special. She is loved by these extended family through birth families and marriages and second marriages and all of just this extension of love for my daughter. And we just feel so blessed but I got to tell you, when we get down on the floor, it's a commitment. With a 50-year-old body, it's a commitment. We're going to stay on the floor for quite some time.
Tummy time was for all.
Tummy time was for everybody.
And nap time is enjoyed.
She's still a really good napper. So
she's so sweet. We all love her so much.
Yeah,
she's a blessing.
That reminds me. One time I saw a picture of my grandma. She passed away, I think, when I was 11, and she was pretty old when I knew her. And I remember I saw a picture of her, like sitting on the floor with my older brother. And I was like, she sat on the floor? How can she? That just never would occur to me that she like got on the floor and played.
That she was young.
Because she was like, when I knew her, she was like 90. But stay on the floor. Someone will see a picture.
We groan, and the funny thing is she'll start to groan. She'll stand up and she'll go, oh, and I thought, oh no. This little child is groaning as she stands up. That's learned behavior.
Well, I have to say my brother-in-law is so funny. I mean, at one point I said, so you guys getting called the grandparents? And he says, I do. And every time somebody thinks I'm the grandpa, I just wear it as a badge of honor. I mean, because, and I'll tell you, this little girl has just absolutely captured both of your hearts.
All of our hearts.
But all of us. But I mean, her daddy, oh my goodness, he is just whipped over this little girl. I mean, and she actually kind of looks like him. That's what's so interesting. Yeah. I mean, she totally looks like she could be his daughter.
Wow.
And she is a blessing to all of us. And wasn't there like a sort of a, I don't know, premonition or a thought or a dream that Travis had? I want you to share that, because I know some of these details. I'm letting David ask these questions because he doesn't know you. And so I'm sitting back here, but there's something I do want you to share because it was so tender.
Travis hadn't told me about this dream, but as we were eyeing each other over these 3 days before we met with the birth mom, at the time that we met with the birth mom and we had kind of come to this kind of a soft agreement that that's what was going to happen, he shared with her that he had had a dream about a week before, and he had dreamt that he was giving a little girl a blessing. Now, he has stood in many circles giving children blessings, but never has he given a name and a blessing to a child. And so he kind of shoved it off a little bit and thought, well, but he woke up and he remembered, and he thought, maybe I'll just be asked as a bishop, maybe I'll be asked to give a blessing to a little girl. And so even before we knew the sex of the child, we knew, or he had a premonition that it was going to be this little girl. And the birth mother did something just truly beautiful and selfless, that after this soft agreement, about a week passed, and then we met again. And then she formally asked us if we would adopt her child. And at that time, she asked if we wanted to know the sex of the baby. And we said, of course we do. We do. We absolutely do. And so she then brought out a gift, a box that we were able to open and have our own gender reveal of this child. And in that box was a copy of her ultrasound, which she had gone back. The first time that she had an ultrasound, she didn't look at the screen. When she knew that we wanted to adopt, she went back on her own and had an ultrasound taken again, and so that we could have that picture. And it had cute hair ribbons and bows in it. And that will always remain such a special gift, in addition to giving us this beautiful gift of being a mother and a father. But how selfless of her to do that.
Well,
so yeah, we had a lot of things along the way that has just really been remarkable.
And so also to clarify, so how many years was it from you getting married to then adopting this little girl?
So we were married just over 23 years.
Wow. Wow.
And like I said, a really great life. Challenges, and especially with my husband's health and my own health and all the struggles and trials that come with just everyday life.
Yeah. And maybe this is an inappropriate question, but I just think it's an interesting point because, I mean, really, where do you think that you would be, and answer truthfully if you can, where would you be, like, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, if this opportunity had never come along, if you still did not have a child?
We had a great life before our child came along. And I truly believe we would have continued on doing what we have tried to do, which is to make the most of our life. Haven't always been successful. And there have been moments of despair and feeling maybe even hurt when people have said things and made judgments about our decisions or what they assume our decisions are. And those are, they were still there, but I really think that we would have been just as happy.
Yeah.
Not just as happy. I can't imagine. See, that's a hard thing because I can't even imagine, right, being life without her.
I feel like you saying that, I feel like that is such an important and faith-filled thing to say, that, I believe in miracles. Miracles do happen, and obviously one happened in your family, but also sometimes they don't happen in the way that we want them to. And even if that is the case, I think it's amazing that you would say that we would still be happy. We would still be pressing forward. We'd still be parenting as best we can. And I think that is truly an amazing thing. And yeah, that's just incredible.
Well, I have to tell you, she calls me. I think I was probably at an estate sale or something. That's something I like to do. I remember getting this call from her, and she says, "So I have some news. Travis and I are canceling. We're going to cancel this cruise." Okay, so this is what they were planning on doing.
Yes.
They're going to go on this beautiful Baltic cruise, right? And I do have to tell you, side note, Travis is like the best. He makes all the men in our family look so bad because he is the best gift giver. She gets a flower every week.
Wow.
A single flower, a different kind of flower every week.
That's amazing.
He has it delivered to her office, or I don't know if at home during COVID, if that's still happening or not. I don't know.
COVID things kind of went crazy, but yes, for 13, 14 years, he's been sending me a flower every week.
Every week. Okay. So this is a man who just cherishes his wife. And he, it's never just one gift. I mean, there are these themed gifts, and he gave her like a Viking hat or something like that, because they were going to go
to Norway
on this cruise. And she calls in very somber, we're canceling the cruise. And I'm thinking she's going to, she really pulled one over on me, because I'm thinking she's going to announce like something serious. It was sounding so serious. And she says, we're adopting a baby. And I think it dropped. I'm just, woo!
Freaked out.
I dropped, I think, everything in my hands. And I screamed, and everybody looked at me, and it's okay. I'm fine. And they have many, many, many things planned.
Yeah.
That they were more than happy to cancel. So I have no doubt that they would be doing all sorts of amazing things. But like you said, once you have this sweet joy in your life, you can't even imagine life without that.
What's Norway, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe this is insensitive, but when you were saying that, I thought you were going to say, since you're like an eBay selling wizard, I thought she was going to be like, we canceled the cruise. Can you sell my Viking hat?
Well, I do have to tell you one thing. I had this dress in my hands. It was just, I don't even remember why I bought this dress, but I loved the fabric of this dress. Yeah. I made her little blessing dress out of that.
Oh, that's tender.
And
so she wore it for her blessing and as well as her temple sealing.
6 months later, when everything was finalized, she had it in the temple. And I have to tell you, you said that we look alike. And again, people can't see this. Mm-hmm. But for that first year of life, that poor girl has been so confused, because she knows who her mom is. But she looks at me like, you're trying to trick me. And she just looks at me. And if you can see both of us together, this poor little child is so confused every time I come to town. But now she knows. She knows I'm Linda.
She knows Linda more than she knows any other of my I shouldn't say more than others, but yeah.
She would just stare at me a lot longer than anyone else, trying to figure things out before she could really trust me.
She'll be well prepared for the trickeries of life, because we know there are many.
Anyway.
But really, thank you so much for sharing that. I know that's a personal and tender journey that you've been on. And thanks so much for sharing it with us. If there's anything you want to say in closing, any tips for anybody, that just really anything.
I would just say, be grateful for what you have, because there's so much joy in what Heavenly Father has given to each one of us individually. And then to choose that path back to Him. I think without those opportunities to make choices and to distinctly remember those choices as things get tough, that was a sustaining influence for me.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for taking so much time to share with us. Usually to close, we read the same paragraph that we read. And I hope that as we read it now, that it takes on a little bit of a different meaning for our listeners than it did at the beginning of this podcast. So I'm going to read it again. It says, the first commandment that God gave to Adam and Eve pertained to their potential for parenthood as husband and wife. We declare that God's commandment for His children to multiply and replenish the earth remains in force. We further declare that God has commanded that the sacred powers of procreation are to be employed only between man and woman, lawfully wedded as husband and wife. And I think that was really brought to life by Collette today. So thank you so much for spending time with us. And
I always love spending time with my sis. She's the best.
Me too. Thank you.
Thanks
for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Raising Family podcast. This episode was produced by Carol Rice. Our research coordinator is Angela Valentine. Audio was edited and mixed by John Wright. The Raising Family podcast is brought to you by thefamilyproclamation.org.